good morning, good day, and good evening. Welcome to the show. I'm as always your host, Brody Robertson, and today we have the lead developer of Budgie on the show. Welcome, Joshua. Is it Strobl? Is that how to say your last name? I've only ever seen it written down.
You nailed it. Yes.
Okay,
perfect.
Good.
Yep.
Before we get into anything actually important, I do want to say congratulations on the finished permanent residency. Yeah, there we go. You know, I got close enough.
Yes. As a translator,
Finnish permanent residency. There we go.
Finnish. Yes, there we go. Yeah. Thank you very much.
English is hard.
Yeah, it's one step. Yeah, one step forward, one step closer to Finnish citizenship. So, yeah, very excited.
That is really cool. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of reasons why you wanted to go over there. I don't know if you want to talk about any of that or not.
It is the most generic thing that people can imagine, which is my wife is Finnish. So I moved here for my love.
That, you know,
and
I can respect that.
I've been here since January of 2014, so almost a decade now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
I
moved here when I was just a young boy.
I have left my state a couple of times, and that's pretty much it. I've never left the country.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, it is Australia, and
right?
But the size of one of the states there are like absolutely enormous.
Sure.
So it's probably the size of like a European country or a couple, or who knows? Maybe
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Depending on which ones you. So.
But no one lives here. That's the thing. There's there's like population maps you can see of Australia where all of the population is around the coastline, the entire center, except for places like Alice Springs and a couple of other mining towns, completely empty. But like I haven't even been to New Zealand or anywhere like that, or like Papua New Guinea. I am very boring in that regard. Travel is something I would like to do. It's just a matter of, you know, it costs money. And that's a problem. But that's a whole nother topic. Budgie.
Yes.
It's
a thing.
It is a thing.
Yep. People tend to forget it's a thing. It has a hilarious history, including about, 5,000 different announcements of different toolkits being used.
I guess before we get into that, briefly explain what Budgie is now. We can get into what it was before in a bit.
Sure, yeah. So what Budgie is now is we like to pitch it as sort of a modern desktop environment for end users that also provides a traditional look and feel, a traditional user metaphor. So, you have a traditional bottom taskbar, and we have niceties like Raven and all that. The current Budgie, so Budgie 10.x, is built on top of the GNOME stack. So this is GNOME settings, daemon, mutter. Well, technically not mutter anymore. It's a soft fork of mutter called Magpie for now.
Okay.
But that, GDK and GNOME volume control, which we use for some of the piping for sound devices and stuff. So lots of GNOME bits.
What is this this Magpie thing? I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, so oh boy, every 6 months or so, the Mutter developers will come out with a new version alongside the rest of the GNOME stack.
Right.
And this is always going to be a different Mutter ABI/API. Now, sometimes the changes are very simple, and it might take a day's work to adjust Budgie on top of it. Sometimes it's much more complex. So, for example, with GNOME 44, not 45, but 44, they implemented some changes in Mutter that split off some of the X11 code, which, as one would imagine, whenever X11 legacy code gets touched, there is a lot of regressions.
Right.
And these regressions would affect Budgie, of course, because we use X11 at this moment in time. And we decided, hey, until we switch over to Wayland, let's go ahead and soft fork Mutter at GNOME 43, so before all these regressions happened. So you have two different tracks of Magpie at the moment. You have mainline, which is the soft fork of Mutter, and then you have our quote-unquote V1. And V1 is the WL roots-based Wayland compositor.
Okay. Oh, so that's the direction you're going with the Wayland side.
Yes, so the plan that we announced is that we will be going Wayland only. So initially, when we were making discussion, we were having discussions in May of last year on where we wanted to take Budgie 11 and potentially Budgie 10, depending on the life cycle of that. In terms of Wayland support, was we were going to have Wayland as the primary, and then we would have an X11 fallback.
Okay.
And we've just decided to go full Wayland because we also see the writing on the wall. Especially given the layoffs at Red Hat and shifts in priorities there, it's quite evident to see that development around Xorg server is being reduced, and it just doesn't make any sense when
Reduced
we're like
is one way to put it.
Yes, it's a very diplomatic way of putting it, I would say.
I would say the only development that happens is in the context of X Wayland, but hey, that's just me.
Yes. Yeah.
People don't like to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, and we're like, oh, okay, I guess it depends on the end user, and I recognize, like color management and all that is still a work in progress. But I would say, like, for most end users, Wayland will work perfectly fine, especially when you couple it with, XCG desktop portals and Flatpak applications. Yeah. A lot of it does work without too much fussing around. It's just that remaining 25%. And a lot of that's sort of the harder work, or sometimes it's trying to standardize new Wayland protocols. Yeah. And standardizing in the Linux ecosystem is always really fun, and has no problems and conflicts of interest whatsoever.
One thing I will definitely say in that regard is Budgie seems to be very willing to work with other people.
Yes. Like I would say if I wasn't going to be using Budgie, I would be using KDE because I get along that well with KDE people. I think Budgie people and KDE people jive quite well because we both sort of have this perspective of user-focused customization and personalization. And my approach is, if you want to theme the hell out of Budgie desktop and break it, go for it. You want to make it unreadable text and pink backgrounds, go for it. Have fun. It's your desktop, not mine. I don't have to use your desktop. So that's my approach to customization. And we try to have that approach. And I think KDE does as well. I've seen a lot of commits to their theming engine where there might be a theme that was like last developed like 5 years ago. And somebody will come around and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, you broke the window border radiusing in decorations," and they're like, "Oh, sorry, let's go ahead and get that fixed." It absolutely baffles me. So love the KDE folks.
I think it's hard to really say at this point because it's not done. But at least from the discussions that I've seen, there seems to be a very similar sort of vibe coming from the Cosmic side as well. Now they're shifting off of a GNOME base and doing their own actual desktop environment thing. Like in the discussions I've seen them involved in, if like Jeremy's there, it's like we haven't got anything done yet, so like I guess we'll just do what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I would say I get along quite well with Jeremy. I would say I engaged with him the most around the time that I don't quite remember what the issue was that set everything off, but Jeremy got absolutely blasted on the GNOME GitLab to the point where he ended up deleting his GitLab account. It might have been around Adwaita and accent colors or theming or something. I don't know. Anyways,
that's the biggest one I can think of.
Yeah, so I love what they're doing with Iced. And of course they sort of maintain their own fork of it, and I believe that they upstream stuff back to Iced.
Yeah, they've done a lot of upstream stuff.
Yeah, so I made a blog post in September of 2021 where I was evaluating Iced and Qt and EFL, and Iced wasn't quite there yet. I was really impressed with it when I used a World of Warcraft add-on client called Azure RIP. Um, but it's evolved and matured a lot since then. It's very exciting to see that we're going to have another viable alternative, another viable native toolkit for applications.
Well, it's also,
and especially given this one's cross-platform as well.
It's also really neat to see another Wayland compositor implementation, because right now it's just KDE, GNOME, and then things based on WL roots, which they tend to do different things. Like Hyperland has some additional things, and I'm sure Budgie's going to have their own extensions they choose to use and choose not to use, and maybe add in additional ones that, I don't know, for some use case that maybe you come up with. But it's nice to see someone actually doing another thing. I know there is this whole issue of of standardization on Wayland, which I understand as an argument, and it's a problem, but what in the world's happened to your camera?
I don't know. What happened to my camera?
It's I might be having connection issues on my side.
Oh, okay. I have gigabit, so.
Okay, yeah, we had a storm here. I'm gonna just drop out of the call for a moment and join back.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at it and it's showing red. It's swapping between red and yellow bars for.
Yeah. It's a good day to. Yeah, we have like a thunderstorm going on, so hopefully it's not a big deal. Your camera on my side, your camera has just been lagging pretty much the entire time, but whatever. Your voice is fine. It's just the camera that's been a bit off.
Okay. It's fine. People don't need to see my face.
No,
anyways.
a lot of the people just listen anyway. What was I saying? Oh, right. That was standardization on the Wayland side. It's a tough problem to solve because, like, there is a lot of issues that still need to be dealt with. And if we standardize, it's a lot harder to sort of bring those additional changes in. Like, if we had standardized to the extent that Xorg is standardized today, and we still had all of these missing things from Wayland, I don't know if we'd be dealing with them like as quickly as we are. If that makes any sense.
Right. Yeah. I think so. So what you're referring to with System 76 is their use, I believe, of Smithy, which is a Rust-based implementation of a Wayland compositor, and it's sort of like, I don't know how many attempts there have been at either Rust bindings for WL roots or Rust-based compositors, but it's nice to see that Smithy is still being actively worked on. And what's great about that is they are able to sort of effectively be a player in the Wayland protocol discussions. And at least my understanding is you need like 2 or 3 compositors to implement a given protocol for it to be standardized or moved, I believe, from like unstable to staging or something like that. So having Smithy there, I think will help a lot, because it's yet another option of, hey, can we encourage them to implement, for example, this layer shell protocol or this, screen copying protocol or something. And then suddenly it's able to move from a draft to something that's actually formalized. So.
Well, yeah, and considering that they seem to be very open to like working with WL roots especially, and KDE as well, those extensions that hadn't made their way up into the like main collection have some sort of chance of actually making it there, especially with the backing of System 76. Like, I'm excited to see what they do. I was concerned early on. I didn't really know what we were going to see. But now that they've been doing these like monthly, quarterly, whatever, how often they've been doing these update blogs, like, it's clearly been coming along really, really well. I don't know what it's going to be like to run on a day-to-day basis, But at least looking at it, it seems like they've got something. They've got something coming together.
Yeah, I would say I'm a little trepidatious, concerned, wary of them so heavily using their own fork, because to me it's sort of ICE, because to me it sort of replays on GTK4 and Libidueta yet again, where people might just by default go with the Cosmic Toolkit or whatever they call it, instead of just the baseline iced, or people in the GNOME stack using Libidueta by default instead of GDK. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out there. But crossing my fingers that all the cool stuff that they have in Cosmic will somehow make its way into iced itself. So,
and hey, at least they've got a Wayland compositor coming together. Unlike XFCE's 2 versions away for Wayland. It's just how long there's 2 versions away.
I wouldn't hate on XFCE.
I don't hate on XFCE. They don't. It's just they are a fairly small desktop environment at this point, and it's taking them.
So is Budgie.
That's fair. No, that's fair. Okay.
I mean, how long has this mythical Budgie 11 been in development, right?
Fair point.
I don't know, about 6,000 years, if I had to guess. The project that we should be concerned about is Mate, because we have seen basically no recent movement anyways, on a Wayland compositor in Marco. We saw a very short stint where they were trying out Mir, but yes, they have ported over some of their applications to support Wayland, but they're not exactly moving that quick. Whereas the XFCE folks, I mean, as a testament to the direction that they're going, even Budgie Desktop for Budgie 10 series is actually going to be leveraging one of their libraries, which is libxfce for windowing, because it provides a similar API to WNCK. And on the X11 side, it actually uses WNCK, but also supports Wayland. So we're able to sort of leverage that instead of WNCK directly in order to actually introduce Wayland support in a lot of the code that we had previously used WNCK for. So, so I like the XFCE people.
Oh, no, I've not spoken to any of them myself. I'm sure they're all lovely people. I just don't know how, I hope they get the Wayland stuff sorted out. That's what I'll say. I really do. Because, as you said before, the writing is on the wall. This is the direction we are going.
Yeah.
X is still going to be here for a while. But we are going to start...
Is it, though?
Look, there are people running 10-year-old ThinkPads. It's going to be here for a while.
But if you can't even get it in the repositories at some point,
I think... then
you're going to have to even be compiling all the X stack in Xorg server from scratch.
That's true.
As well.
But there are going to be... I don't see Arch dropping it anytime soon. Gen 2 is going to have it until it stops compiling.
Yeah, probably Gen 2 and Slackware. And,
it's going to be on distros that... It's... I would not be surprised if in the very short future, we don't see it on Ubuntu, we don't see it on Fedora, we don't see it on, these very mainstream... especially Fedora. They've already got the whole KDE thing going down that direction. Nothing's confirmed, but Neil does not want to even touch X11 anymore, so I can't see that not happening. And the second that... the way I see it going, the second that GNOME announces that they're dropping X11 is gone from Fedora. There is no X11 on Fedora anymore. Maybe one more version after that, but...
I don't see that happening. I think we will at some point see it be deprecated. But they would be basically nuking i3 and Mate and Cinnamon and Budgie. I mean, why would they have accepted this fancy Budgie thing only to then be like, yo, you guys got to nuke it? like immediately.
What I'm curious about, because there's a whole Red Hat dropping support for when's that supposed to be happening? I don't remember.
It's not a rel 9 or 10. Like I don't know.
Yeah, I saw the Red Hat dropping Xorg. It's in their docs somewhere.
Yeah, I remember.
Rel 10 5 years away. That's going to be an interesting point, because 5 years from now, like, think about where Wayland was 5 years ago. OBS didn't work. There was no video capture on Wayland.
That's pretty recent.
Yeah, I think it was, I want to say 2 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
The past couple of years have been crazy for improving Wayland.
Yeah, and by then Budgie 11 will actually be out. That I can commit to. 5 years from now, you will have a Budgie 11 at the very least.
You sure you want to commit to that?
Because I think so. I don't think we're gonna have 5 other Toolkit switches before then. So yeah, and at the very least, Budgie 10 will be on Wayland. So God forbid.
What is the state of Wayland for you guys? Like, what do you? I'm sure there's still a lot to work on, but like, what's done? What's being worked on right now? Is anything done?
Yeah. So there's nothing done. So the 2 things that are currently work in progress is the Wayland based compositor. So Magpie v1. So Campbell Jones, aka Sarabit, has been spearheading the efforts on that. I would like to give you a list of all the Wayland protocols he's already implemented, but it changes like practically every day or every few days. So I've lost track. But how convenient that he actually
made Waycheck.
He open sourced. He wrote a tool called Waycheck as a personal project, and you could actually install it. And if you use Wayland, you could see the protocols that your compositor supports, which is kind of cool. But he has been just absolutely kicking ass, I'll say, on the Wayland compositor approach. And then Evan has been working on the libxfce for windowing implementation, so replacing our WNCK code with it. And just the other day, he pushed a Git branch with some like very early work in progress stuff of a new icon task list with us leveraging libxfce for windowing instead of WNCK. So there's still a lot to be done. For example, our panel management needs to be converted. We have to get all of our keyboard input stuff implemented. We got to get exclusion zones implemented, so that way, like, your apps, when you maximize them, won't then like overlap with the panel. Like, there's still a lot of work to be done. But I'm quite happy with the work that is being done on that front. And just yesterday, we released Budgie 10.8.1 as a bug fix release. So our focus now is on 10.9. And that should hopefully, I don't want to commit to anything, but at least we'll start seeing some Wayland code approach on that, or at the very least, maybe some early work being finalized on ITL or icon task list. So there's that. And then something I've been working on is something that's going to be leveraged in Budgie 11, but I'm already working on some code related to that, which is our Budgie desktop or Budgie settings daemon. So a complete rewrite. At the moment, I'm writing in Rust, and I am using Tonic, which is a gRPC implementation and protobuf stuff. So all of our internal communication, and actually technically external, because you could just import the protocol buffer specifications. All that is going to be over protobuf to a centralized daemon. So Budgie panel, that's going to communicate with the daemon. Magpie, going to communicate with the daemon. The control center will communicate with the daemon. All of your configuration will be done through the daemon. So that's being worked on at the moment. So, lots of good stuff.
Sounds like there's a lot of work to do.
It is a lot of work, and that is even getting into the fact that we also need a XDG desktop portal. For Budgie as well, because the WLR one won't fit our needs, unfortunately.
Look.
So
the WLR one won't fit anyone's needs, to be honest.
No. it's like a mountain of work. It's like an iceberg where it's like, everybody sees like just this little bit. They don't see everything that's underneath the water. I would almost argue that the portal might be the biggest item. So Oro has actually provided an RFC for that on our discussions, and there's been some discussions around that. I probably don't need to explain who Oro is.
Why is Oro's one of my Discord mods?
Yeah.
Why is Oro and Neil seem to show up in every discussion
yes.
get involved in?
Yep. Well, it probably doesn't surprise you, and he discussed this where he's in our stand-ups every week. Neil is, so
of course he is. Why?
So the KDE stuff came to be no surprise to me. But yeah.
Look, I'm happy that there are these people out there doing incredible work, but I do laugh every single time. Like, if I go to a KDE related thing or like ASCII Linux thing, I expect Neil to be there. But when it's just some random, when I found out that like Neil did work on Lugaru, for example, like, okay, sure, why not?
Yeah, there was even a short time where he was trying to do some work in Solus. So it's just like the guy's everywhere. I don't understand how, but he has his fingers in all the pies, which is actually quite nice, because if you ever need to get in touch with somebody, chances are Neil knows that person. So it's like, oh, I need to get in touch with the KDE person. He'll be like, oh, I know that person. I spoke with them 1.5 years ago at this one conference. You'll be like, great, okay, networking.
I don't know how he does it. I really don't. But like, it's awesome. There are people out there that are like this passionate about improving the FOSS world. Like, we would simply not have software anywhere near as good as we have if there weren't, obviously, like people like Neil and Oral, like you recognize them straight away, but there are so many people out there like that who may be like dedicated to one specific project. Like, they may not be just touching everything. Like, it's just like one little thing that is their like mission in life to make better. And like, that's awesome. Like that's just awesome.
Or you might have a handful of developers that are working on something like curl that is like foundational to like everything.
Yeah.
It seems. And somehow like they still have a problem actually making a living unless they get enough sponsorships and donations. So it's like, people should be mindful of this as well. Like not only is there like sometimes a handful of people you might not know about, but also sort of these projects that you might take for granted, like throw a few bucks or local currency their way if you could afford it, because I know that they would appreciate that.
What's it like on the Budgie side? Like, I hear about Budgie fairly often, but I don't actually know how like popular of a desktop environment it is.
Well, so we don't collect any telemetry.
Okay.
So I can't tell you how popular it is.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
And I'm very anti-telemetry when it comes to stuff like Fedora Budgie Spin or Fedora Onyx. Like, you're not going to have telemetry in there unless it's like the default DNF count me. I would say in terms of popularity, Ubuntu Budgie is without a doubt the most popular operating system that ships Budgie Desktop. And of course, they do a lot of customization on top of that through our panel API system, which is very, very cool. After that, I would probably say it's Solus, but I don't have an exact number count for you. So
no, that makes sense.
But for me, I mean, it could literally just be me using it, and that would kind of be fine. I would still be working on it regardless, to be completely honest. But
so, what are you running right now? I think you mentioned Onyx before. Is that what you've got running on all your systems?
Technically, no.
Okay.
So I have a home server as well, and that's not running Fedora Onyx. Okay, that's running Fedora CoreOS.
That makes sense.
But all my systems, so my work laptop was actually literally the first time we started generating OS tree branches for Onyx, I installed Fedora Silverblue and then switched over to the Onyx branch with Budgie Desktop and all that. So that's been running it for probably 8 months now. I don't know how long it's been a thing. Personal laptop runs Fedora Onyx. My desktop, as of Wednesday, is running Fedora Onyx. So I figured out a way that wasn't hacky to actually get Budgie Desktop to compile and install into a location that's persistent, because that's not just your, like, you can't just blast slash or slash user because that's owned by OS tree, but there's elements of like a var that get mounted to directories that you would recognize as like user local. And those paths get loaded before the ones in user bin, so that way I could do Budgie Desktop development on Fedora Onyx. And for those that don't know, because who could keep up with Fedora names anymore?
I was gonna
Fedora Onyx is the immutable variant of Fedora Budgie Spin. So it's the thing that has RPM OS tree. It has Toolbox. You know, you install your applications through stuff like Toolbox or Flatpak instead. Yeah, hopefully it'll be called Fedora Atomic Budgie.
That would be nice.
Either in this release or in 40, because there's actually some movement that's been going on, some discussions that have been had about shifting branding to Fedora Atomic again. And we now have a Fedora Atomic Desktop SIG as well, which is a special interest group. And that's led by Timothy Ravier, which is one of the developers of. No, I don't know if he's in or not. He probably is. If there's a SIG, just assume Neil's in it. So there, of course, there's that, and then there's been discussions with the Fedora Workstation / Fedora Silverblue people as well. So I don't know if the branding for that's going to change, but at the very least, there is hope that you won't have to remember all the super confusing names like Silverblue, Kino White, Cericia, Onyx. I don't know if there's anything else. I think those
are the official ones, but then you have unofficial ones which also Blue. Which used a similar naming scheme, which is
Yup. So I use Fedora Atomic Budgie.
Atomic is I get why they originally got rid of it, because they wanted to distance this immutable thing from like Workstation, because people have this right or wrong perception of what Workstation is. And by calling it this other thing, calling it Silverblue gave it like this sort of own, I guess, meaning, like, that's separate from what Fedora normally would make you think about.
Yeah.
It made sense then.
It made sense then, but now where you have multiple of these variants, it's like, is it named after a gem or a mineral, or is it not? Like, we'll never know. So let's just... So my proposal was we would have like something like Fedora Budgie Atomic instead of Fedora Atomic Budgie. But I don't really care which one we go with. So my line of thinking with Fedora Budgie Atomic is that, at least my viewpoint is, when people are installing Fedora with their desktop environment, they're making a conscious choice about that desktop environment first, and then anything after that is like additional, it's extraneous. So if they want to choose the Atomic version, it would be the Atomic version of their desktop environment or of that variant, rather than them choosing the operating system and then the technology and then the desktop environment.
So the non-Atomic version is just called Fedora Budgie, yes?
Yeah, so it's Fedora Budgie Spin.
It's
just called Fedora. It's Spin, but Fedora Budgie is just what people call it. So, yeah.
I'm sure... I agree with what you're saying. I'm sure there's a whole legal discussion they have to have about how they use the Fedora Atomic branding. That's their problem to work out. Either way, I would be happy either way as well. it's going to make it a lot easier to explain what things actually are, especially if, you know, I don't know, they want to bring something else on, like someone to make like an atomic version of Mate, for example. Like, you wouldn't have to come up with some other like weird name to make it fit into this.
Yeah, and of course there used to be Pantheon in the official Fedora repos too, and I know that there were some problems with that. I think also centered around Mutter, which probably surprises nobody. So Gala, for those that don't know, which is Pantheon's window manager, is based on top of Mutter. So I don't know. It'd be nice to see like a re-inclusion of Pantheon. I know it's more centered around elementary OS, but it's also available in places like Arch. So having it in Fedora again officially and having some spins, I think would be pretty dope, because I think a lot of people just want to use a specific desktop environment, and they should be able to choose the platform of their choice. You know, if they use like Fedora Server or RHEL or something at work, they might want their own fancy version of it on the desktop. So,
So why is it that you're actually running the Immutable spin right now? Why'd you go that direction?
Dog fooding, for one, because so dog fooding is a terminology of basically I'm testing what I'm working on.
Okay.
So I'm using it as the current beta. I will continue using it even after it's officially released, because we do have the final freeze coming up. So I like that. I also sort of like some of the safety aspects of it, being able to roll back without having to deal with like Btrfs snapshots and all that kind of stuff, where I'm just able to pick a particular commit, is also really handy for testing, because I do the Fedora packaging of Budgie desktop. I will install those, and then if I want to clean up my layers, I could just revert back to the previous commit of the OS tree base image. So that helps with development. It helps me keep track of what I've installed. It also sort of forces me in the direction of Flatpaks and Toolbox, which helps me containerize a lot of stuff. And those obviously can be used outside of Fedora Atomic, but it's like a way of not polluting your base system with these Atomic images. So I primarily use it for like development purposes. I use it for quote unquote dog fooding. And it's just badass. I think it's badass anyways. I don't know about you. I know a lot of people are just nonplussed about Atomic, and that's perfectly fine. And I also understand that some people prefer having reproducibility through stuff like Nix as opposed to immutability, which their reproducibility also has immutability, but without getting too technical, I understand like some people would prefer that, but yeah, I like the immutability aspect.
One thing, so if anytime someone mentions Nix, I tend to get like a giant thread about why I still have not used Nix. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Because I think I mentioned offhand once that I was gonna like test it out at one point, and that was like 3 years ago. I never did it. And now the Nix people bother me every chance to get.
Well, I am welcome. They are welcome to temporarily redirect that frustration in those comments to me, because I also have not used Nix, and I don't want to, because every single time I try to take a look at the Nix documentation, it's awful, and it always is like, oh yeah, but why didn't you read this blog from like 2018? Come on, Josh, like you should know this blog exists. It explains everything. So I haven't really messed around with it too much. Maybe improve the documentation first and actually provide like a step-by-step proper guide, and then I will. Until then, there are also solutions like Fleek by the Universal Blue people, and they provide something in a much more digestible format, which is a YAML. And then it sort of creates Nix stuff in the background, and you could sort of like, when you're ready, it's like training wheels. You could take off the training wheels and then have a Nix-based setup. So that's like with Home Manager and all that kind of stuff.
The one thing I do know about Nix though is people joke about like Arch Linux users telling you that they use Arch, but Nix users are so much worse. They will make sure
they're very passionate.
Yeah, I get it. Like, it's like a unique
I
system.
understand the
It's
value.
different. Yeah, it makes sense. It's just, look,
I personally would also like the idea of like, I say I want this version of this library, and it's going to be that version until I personally upgrade it. I think that's dope.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's just the Nix language that I'm not a big fan of.
Yeah, and I look, I'm happy with my absolute garbage Arch system that is cluttered with nonsense. I have 1,881 packages installed.
What? How?
So
what's wrong with you?
So here's the thing, right? I occasionally will do videos on software. Like I've got a video planned on Waycheck. Now, oftentimes, Waycheck is one thing I will keep around. Oftentimes, I install things that I don't intend to keep around, and then I don't uninstall them. And I've not reinstalled this system for about 3 years. And over time, you just build up nonsense. And yeah, I would probably benefit quite a bit from containerization, because eventually, like, you know, I can install things in like an Arch container or something, and then every couple of months, delete the container.
You just blast a container. Exactly. Yeah. I did that. I did that for my past job. I was running all this stuff within a container, and then when I left that job, it was like, great. I don't have to deal with like reinstalling my system and getting all the gunk off of it. Just deleted the container and job done. Like that was it. So, but I'll have you know, Waycheck is available as a flat pack. So you can just install it there. You don't have to install the Arch package, assuming you haven't already, which you probably have, because I think Arch users just default to AUR and Arch Arch community.
It is in the main repos because, you know, Campbell has the whole like
he's a TU. Yeah, he's a trusted user. Yeah.
So that's not an issue. no AUR this time.
Right. Maybe you should use like systemd timers to like auto uninstall the stuff.
See,
maybe after like a week or something. You know, there's probably like a safe amount of a buffer, right?
Sure. Yeah, maybe.
It's a very janky way. But...
it's eventually gonna cause some sort of what would you say? Like, what's the word? It like grabs something and then just knocks out half my system. Oh
right, yeah. It's like a cascading effect.
Yeah, cascading effect. There we go.
Well, it's like the Linus thing, and I don't mean Linus Torvalds, where you know he uninstalls Steam and suddenly his desktop environment's gone, sort of thing.
I think what happened then, I think the Steam package required an older dependency. Yeah, it required an older dependency, which ended up rolling back a package, which had to roll back another package, and cascaded the entire desktop out. Which is, I still, my favorite part about that entire situation are the people that were defending it as if that was a thing that was supposed to happen. Like, no, that was a bug. Like, that was not supposed to happen.
It was a bug. They fixed it immediately, and then he didn't reevaluate it. Which, I mean, like, okay, fair. It's your first impression sort of thing. But, like, come on. Like, Luke put in, like, all this effort. He used to, like, daily drive Mint. I don't know if he does anymore. Like, you could put in a little bit more effort.
Did he go to Manjaro after Pop? I'm pretty sure that's... Yeah.
Oh, I mean, that was just...
I think it was...
that was a fatal error.
It was Manjaro KDE. Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah. I mean, one the mistake was just Manjaro, right? Like... I mean, I know there's Manjaro people that they love it. I don't know. I would say it's Stockholm syndrome.
The Manjaro people don't like me. I've been too mean to Manjaro too many times.
Oh, so they're not watching the video anyway.
Oh, they might be. They might be hate watching. I don't know.
Oh, fair enough. But you're welcome to go over to buddiesofbudgie.org and hate watch the blog.
Actually, that's one thing I don't want to touch on. What actually is like Buddies of Budgie?
Buddies of Budgie is an open source organization that I founded when I left Solus, and the goal of it is to develop Budgie Desktop alongside a bunch of we don't really say downstreams anymore because they're part of the process, so they're not downstream anymore. but alongside partners like Ubuntu Budgie. And we have people on Solus, we have people on Arch, and on Fedora. So we're like a very multidisciplinary team across many different operating systems and platforms, which I think is great because for a long time, Budgie Desktop was associated with Solus, and that had its downsides. So it being outside of Solus now in its organization, I think has done a lot of good. Especially when we actually have releases. And they're not just around like the GNOME stack, because for a while during the Solus days, it was like, yeah, we're only going to do a release when we absolutely have to. Otherwise, we're sort of buying our time until GDK 4 comes out. And well, it came out and I tried using it. Yeah. Anyway, so in January of last year, I created Buddies a Budgie and brought a bunch of people together, and I think we've been killing it in terms of Budgie Desktop since.
During that whole segment, your camera completely cut out, and now like the video was trying to catch up to your voice, so like it completely. So it's probably approval. No, you're fine now. It caught up, but yeah, during that, like you had no idea what to do. I love my connection right now. It's so great.
Yeah, you should move here. You can get gigabit for like €30 per month. Nice.
I get well, I'm supposed to get 250 by 25. I get 250 by 6.5 usually for 100 Australian dollars a month.
Oh my god! How much is that in a real currency though? Because that is Australian dollars. So it's is that like $5 American dollars?
It's like 70, something like that.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, so like it's not great.
That's pretty rough.
It's gotten a lot better. Also, this is a fiber connection, by the way.
It's fiber. Yes, I'm not even on fiber.
It's fiber. So okay. Let me explain the Australian internet situation. So, we don't really have ISPs here. We do, but it's not like real ISPs. So, in Australia, we have basically a complete government monopoly on internet. So, almost all of the lines are owned by a group called the NBN, the National Broadband Network. Now, the initial plan was going to be fiber to every single house, gigabit, turn Australia into they wanted to sort of make Australia a tech hub, like Korea is, for example. Now, the problem is the government changed. And when that happened, they were like, that's too expensive. Let's not do that. Let's run fiber to these nodes and then use the existing copper out to the houses.
Right, okay.
So, then the government changed again. And they were like, that's dumb. Let's do the original plan. And everything ended up costing twice as much because they then had to redo all of the holes and all that, redo all that stuff. So now we're in the process of migrating properly over to fiber. But all of the lines are owned by the NBN. So you only get a very set, there are a set number of packages. So they're the 50 by whatever, 250 by 25. These are set things that cannot be deviated from by the ISPs. They can offer you less if they want to, but all they are doing are rebundling the packages sold from the IBN. So from the NBN. So pretty much they're all just resellers of the one ISP we have. So it's a great system.
Sounds sounds perfect.
It's
no issues whatsoever.
It's like the US system, but the entire country is instead of you have these zones that are owned by specific ISPs. Right. That's just the whole country. Yeah. It's great. I love it.
Yeah. For me, it's when people even discuss US issues at this point, I'm like, yeah, I don't even know what you're talking about. I haven't lived there in so long that is that how it is nowadays?
That's what I hear apparently.
Yeah. Okay. Well. That's unfortunate. I did read that they're planning on bringing back net neutrality in the US, or at least that's the hope. So congratulations, United States. Looking forward to that. I guess.
I'm sure people when nothing explodes instantly, everyone's like, oh, nothing occurred. So, look, I don't expect anything to go well with anything like that.
Yeah.
But I guess we should probably get into the history of Budgie, the history of Solus, all this mess, because it's a mess. I guess the best place to start is the start. That seems like a good place to start. Yeah. So.
Yep, that makes sense to me logically in my head. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah.
We could start at the start. I was not there at the start of the start. I came slightly after the start of the start. So Ike created Budgie Desktop basically to be like GNOME Shell, but also sort of GNOME to like a sort of a modern aesthetic on top of the GNOME stack. So the reason why he did that on top of the GNOME stack instead of forking it was for the obvious maintenance costs.
Sure.
And it obviously eased development back then. The culture, I would say, of GNOME was quite a bit different back then. And as GNOME Shell development has progressed and they've turned from more of a platform to a product-oriented focus, in my opinion, we've seen a shift of culture there. But at the beginning, we had the likes of Cinnamon, where initially they had forked GNOME Shell, and then they forked everything to have like their own X apps and their own stack of ownership there. And that was an approach that was desired for Budgie Desktop. And he developed Budgie Desktop alongside his development of Evolve OS. So this was very early in 2014. But I would say it really popped off in early 2015. So this was like Budgie 7, Budgie 8 days. That's when it really, at least in my opinion, started getting more usable. And the thing that attracted me to it was it had a Chrome OS look, which was quite nice at the time.
Oh wow, I'm seeing an old picture.
But it actually,
yeah, that did look really good for 2015.
Yeah, but it turned out it's actually, so the reason why it looked so much like that is because Ike was just really bad at CSS styling, so he just didn't know what to theme it as, so there wasn't, but it looked great, so like I'm not complaining.
That's how I feel when people ask me about my theme. I'm just like, yeah, I have a blue accent and it's all, the color is black. That's all. I do nothing else. There's nothing fancy here.
Yeah. Mine has just been like a dark bottom panel for forever.
Keep it simple.
And then Raven.
Yeah.
I don't need it to change. It works literally just as it is. I like this traditional desktop metaphor. But anyways, so I joined Evolve OS in March of 2015. So I think it was like March 15th of 2015. I started doing packaging and all that, and somehow managed to get looped into that, despite the fact that there was like literally no packages. I couldn't even open up my password manager because Mono didn't exist, so that was a big priority for me. Because this was before KeyPass XC, so it was just KeyPass. So got started with that. I was like mostly doing packaging and web stuff. And as that time progressed, Budgie kept evolving. I don't remember the exact timeline with all the 8 stuff, but we started working on 10. And I was like, hey, Ike, I've been using like this Windows thing for gaming every once in a while. And they kind of have like this cool action bar. But I also want like notifications built into it, kind of like what OS X had at the time. It does now, but back then it was called OS X. So can we have a system where we could pull out a sidebar and it has like applets and notifications? So we came up with the name. So it's what became as Raven. Now initially we had like all the Budgie settings in Raven, but as we started adding more things, that became a mess very quickly, and we realized that had to be split out. So that was short-lived. So Budgie was like sort of so Raven was like the major feature for 10 series, and I think that's really when things started to kick off with adoption in other operating systems as well. For example, Ubuntu Budgie Remix came out, which later became Ubuntu Budgie when it was formalized and accepted as a proper flavor, I think is what they call it. Not spin, but flavor of Ubuntu. And yeah, it's evolved since then, even though the name changed to Solus. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how much you want to get into when you left the project and all of that, because I'm sure there's some drama there that you don't want to get into. But
so when Ike left, when Ike left left is a very polite way of saying it. When he disappeared in the years, I want to say it was 2019. Anyways,
that's what Wikipedia says.
Yeah, I swear it's
Budgie was created. It was announced that Doherty had ceased communication with the Solus team for unknown reasons in 2018.
2018, right? My God. So during summer of 2018, I started picking up Budgie desktop development. So I had like a quote unquote summertime Solus development session where I implemented notification groups. I believe it was either notification groups or per app volume control. So that's when those got introduced. So that was quite exciting. Those were two things that were bugging me. Before that, it was just a linear list of notifications all jumbled together chronologically. So grouping them up, as the name would imply, by application, helped sort of calm how would I say it? Calm the storm of notifications I was getting, especially in places like Discord. Because I could just be like, yeah, I'm just going to clear all the Discord notifications instantly. So that's pretty great. And then the per app volume control was something I really wanted because I have a tendency to like my Spotify super duper low, almost like faint background noise, but then all my other system volumes and all my other desktop audio at normal. So that's how I typically do it. But anyway, so I implemented that to scratch an itch. And then when he announced that he was evidently leaving the project, I became the experience lead of Solus, which basically meant all the software that he had been previously developing in terms of like graphical software, like Software Center and all that, suddenly became my responsibility.
Right.
Didn't ask for it, but it became that. So, yeah. And that's ever since then I've been leading Budgie desktop development. And then obviously I left in January of 2022. And I created the organization and been leading it through that. So, but yeah, it was a very stressful time, both prior to my departure at Solus, but also when Ike was leaving. So,
one thing I want to ask you about was what sort of experience had you had in programming before you got involved with all of this? Had you had any, or did you just like jump into it like when you got involved with the project?
It was primarily full stack development. So at that point, TypeScript, JavaScript, less/Sass, Golang, that sort of thing. But I actually had started my first commits of like C and Bala code were back in April of 2016. So I was touching Budgie desktop and Raven primarily before then, but I wasn't as involved in it. It was very small things here and there. So I did have programming experience with it. I managed to avoid most of the C. And by that, I mean most of the G object C, which is a whole other thing, which is perfect and has no issues. And I'm sure the glib people absolutely love it. I do not. So I managed to avoid most of that. Nowadays, I don't have that luxury. But how convenient that we're moving away from GDK, and as a result, we're moving away from G-object and glib too. And we're able to write things in programming languages that we don't hate. like C++ and Rust.
What problem do you actually have with G-objects? Because I've not done any sort of...
There's a lot of boilerplate that you have to deal with when it comes to typecasting and defining G-objects and signals and macros and all of that. So it just creates a lot of noise in your application that shouldn't otherwise be necessary.
Right.
I mean, I can't imagine doing GTK development with C without G-object. I mean, obviously the two are interlinked, but just C by itself, I would say, is not ideal, especially if you're using an older C standard. But I would say ergonomically, I prefer Vala and Rust for GTK over C for sure. Because Vala provides you a more object-oriented approach, and just as a language, it's quite
now you've
quite nicer.
You just said OO's good. You're gonna have the you'd have lots of
in the context of widget development. I think object-oriented is the logical approach. I would also have you note that I do React development for a living, so I'm also used to the functional approach, where it's less OO. So I understand both. I understand the Elm approach that like ICE used, and I also understand the OO stuff. But comparatively, from C to Vala, the Vala stuff is much more ergonomic. The problem you have with it is they do their own transpiling down to C, and it's not perfect. And by it's not perfect, I mean, in the case of, for example, Budgie Desktop, we had to push out a release, I want to say it was early this year, where suddenly there was a change in Vala that resulted in how they were freeing integer matrices caused seg faults. So whenever you tried to do a search in Budgie menu, things would explode because we were using it as part of our search algorithm for like determining relative, like your search term to application names and keywords and stuff. So that's not ideal. And right at this moment in time with the latest Clang, it doesn't exactly work the best with Vala either. So you're kind of forced to use GCC. But so it's not perfect, but you know, I would say if you're gonna do GDK development, you go with Vala or Rust unless you hate yourself. So, or alternatively, there are other toolkits out there.
There are.
You could do there's Iced and there's Iced with Rust. You have Qt with about 1,000 different bindings. So, and of course you could do Python with GTK, but I think most people with Qt, they use C++. And I've seen some of the Rust code with the CSX to Rust stuff, and it actually doesn't look all that bad. So the bindings have definitely matured around it since then, especially with Qt 6 stuff. It's actually pretty good. So there's always those two as an alternative. Unfortunately, those are kind of like the big ones. EFL is sort of in choppy waters, I would say, which is unfortunate, but it is. Their Wayland story hasn't really been progressing all that much. It's been experimental for like 3 years now. And the last major development of it, I would say, was 2 years ago.
God.
And I'll link you actually.
Okay.
Let me see if I have it. Yeah, here. Okay. This one wasn't too ideal. So this was recently done, and by recent I mean 3 months ago. Which is the question of EFL and enlightenment participation in Wayland protocols.
So ask about.
It's a very short thread.
Correctly, I don't believe EFL Enlightenment has participated in any Wayland protocols just for a long time, at least post-governance. I don't blame anyone at all. I can completely understand why this would happen and why this is perfectly fine. However, in case you don't plan to participate, I'd like you to consider your Wayland protocol membership. Indeed, some governance decisions require feedback to votes from members, and inactive members make it harder to pass a decision. If you plan to participate in the future, or if you otherwise wish to retain your membership, I'd be happy to keep things as is. If you don't plan to participate and you're okay with dropping membership, That helped us with making governance adjustments, I believe. What do you think? Huh. I actually wasn't aware of how they handled...
Yeah.
I didn't know they had voting like that. That's news to me.
And as you can see from the comment, the individual that was basically the representative hasn't been active in EFL Enlightenment for years. And they, to the best of their knowledge at the very least, so I'm parroting what they said, congratulations, I am now TTS, nor has EFL/Enlightenment been actively pursuing anything Wayland related in the meantime, to the best of my knowledge. So EFL is problematic. It doesn't mean it's impossible, of course, to use EFL. But they have a lot of work to do on that front. So there's a lot of front work that we would need to do with EFL as well. So that's... But yeah, so that's why I didn't bring up EFL as an alternative to like Qt and GDK at this point, because it's not doing too good, so which sucks.
So what you're saying is there isn't going to be a toolkit swap over to EFL?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there's a lot of like front work that would need to be done to facilitate.
I like how support. It's still possibly on the... How many times has Budgie swapped toolkits?
Technically, Budgie hasn't swapped toolkits at all.
Okay.
Because
I want to... Sure.
Because we haven't written any of the code that we would have swapped over to.
Okay.
In terms of announcements, oh man. So let me provide some context.
Okay.
So when I don't even remember when the Qt announcement was made, but that was written. I think I published it, but it was more or less written by Ike, not to throw him under the bus because it was a team decision.
2017.
So the decision was made to explore and move to Qt and away from GDK. However, it turned out that at the time, most of us just really didn't like C++. And there really wasn't anything like Rust in terms of bindings Rust hadn't really even popped off by then. So there wasn't really any bindings for it.
Yeah, that was only 2 years into Rust at that point.
Yeah.
I think I was just hearing murmurings about Rust around then.
Yeah. So that wasn't really viable. And there was a lot of early work in like Qt 5 with Qt Wayland. Things have matured obviously a lot since then over the last few years. In terms of Qt, and now we have Qt 6. But then it wasn't ready. So all that was practically shelved as soon as it was announced, which like at that point it's like, oh boy, why do we even bother to announce it? And then Ike leaves, and the rest of us are like, okay, well, we're not the biggest fans of a C++. GDK4 is right around the corner. It should have all this cool stuff, right? Like, look at all these libhandy widgets, right? Surely all of those will actually be in GDK, so it could actually be usable. Like, some of these widgets will actually just be upgraded to the handy variants. No, that didn't happen. We got libidweta instead, which is probably not a mystery. I'm not a fan of libidweta, but I'm not a fan of libidweta for the widgets. The widgets are awesome. I just don't like it being forced to use the libidweta style sheet. And I know, technically speaking, you could use a GDK environment variable, or you could, load up a GDK CSS file and overload some of it. But that's not really the same as what we have with GDK3, which is a proper theming support, or at least in my view, proper theming support. The GDK developers would argue differently, of course. So we had made the obvious announcement of like, yo, we should do it in GDK because we use GDK currently. The new GDK4 should be dope when it comes out. It comes out, I write an application with it. It's super buggy because, like, I don't know if they fixed it since then. I don't think so. But like list boxes, if you had a certain number of children in the list, it would reset your scroll position randomly. which is not ideal if, for example, you're trying to write like an audio player and you're scrolling through artists and suddenly your scroll position's at the top. So and they haven't exactly been very quick to work on that because all of their focus has been on Adwaita. So, but that went out the door. And also around that time, stuff was happening in terms of accent colors, the proposal to remove theming entirely. Adwaita was starting to become a thing. Jeremy getting absolutely blasted. Just in general, a lot of major community and conduct issues, I would say, in GNOME. And I was like, yeah, this isn't something I want to be part of. And like we discussed it internally, and some people were against the idea of C++. So I was like, okay, well, that doesn't really leave me a choice. I guess if we can't use C++ because some people don't like it, then it can't be Qt. So I guess it's just EFL. Like, that's just a process of elimination. I tried out Iced, it just wasn't ready. It's obviously matured since then. Now, fortunately, Budgie is outside of Solus at this point. We have a much more diverse amount of people, and we also like C++. So that puts more things back on the table. We like Rust, so that keeps ICE on the table. It's just unfortunate to see EFL in its current state. So if we go with EFL, which is still the plan, but it will require more work for us. But who knows? What I will say is nobody will know until we make an announcement with something that's actually just immediately usable
as an
plan.
Alpha. That's a very good plan.
Because let's be real, I'm tired of making these pre-announcements of switching to things for the ground to fall out underneath me, right? Everybody else is sick of it, and it's a freaking laughing stock. Like, let's be real here. It's like I make jokes about it. Like, even during our stand-ups, I make jokes here. Like, I don't know, 5,000 different toolkits. Who knows? Maybe by the time we do Budgie 11, a new toolkit will be invented. But yeah. So we're just going down the approach of you'll know when you know. And right now our focus is Wayland and Budgie 10. So, and we still have a ton of work to do in terms of in terms of Budgie 11. Like before we even get to the graphical stuff. So
but
the nice thing. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say the post I saw about Budgie Desktop moving to Qt, that was from OMG Ubuntu, and the post was from 2017, but someone commented on it 3 years ago saying, I guess they're happy they never did this.
Yeah, it's... I mean, honestly, I wish we just never made any announcements about any of it. That would have been much better, because then I wouldn't have had to make announcements and then, I mean, though, to be fair, I made the mistake of the obvious choice, which is sticking with GTK4, and then regretting that immediately. But yeah, so at this point, it's just no more pre-announcements. We're just gonna write things in our little corner. And YOLO.
My favorite pre-announcement is Gimp 3, which is supposed to happen at the end of this year. I don't see it happening by the end of this year. Maybe next year.
I look forward to a Gimp that has finally moved over to an EOL'd version of a toolkit.
That'd be nice.
Super dope. Yeah. And then everybody could be like, hey, you should rewrite it in something like Qt.
Honestly, like Gimp is an incredible tool, right? But like, I don't know like what their future plan is, because they're not gonna do GTK 4 or GTK 6 or 7 whenever they get around to it. I don't know, because like 3 made sense when 3 was still like the main version, but like that was a while ago. So,
and I don't want to imply that GTK4 is bad. It's just a lot of the things that you would want are in libidwayda. And I get it. That's perfectly fine for a lot of people. I just want people to theme the hell out of my desktop and whatever apps I make. Like, yeah, okay, it risks them breaking. You know what? That's a problem for theme developers. That's not my problem. So I could just close the issue and be like, hey, sorry, talk to your theme developer. That's not a big deal to me. I know it's a big deal to some GNOME developers, but for me, it's like, yeah, it's just another issue, whatever. Like, takes me 2 seconds to copy paste a comment and close it. You don't even have to do that. Just put a label on it and GitHub will auto close it. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with Gimp. I'm hopeful that they'll switch over to Qt. I would like to see that. I don't think it's likely, but I hope.
Call it. I've got to rename it then. Got to come up with something for it.
I mean, so long as they keep their licensing, it'll still technically be something related to GNU, right? Because it's the GNU, not GDK. It's the GNU image manipulation program.
Fair. That's a fair point. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So they don't have to.
You don't have to, but it'd be funny.
They should. They should take that opportunity to rebrand because GIMP is a terrible name. I mean, there's a reason why they've changed their desktop file to GNU image manipulation program in long form instead of GIMP.
Yeah.
Like there's plenty of names. Like remember, there's that Glimpse project. I don't know if they actually do anything.
Glimpse.
But just be
Glimpse got archived years back after.
Right.
They had support initially, and then I think devs kind of stepped away from the project and it just couldn't really keep going. That's my understanding.
So just ask them, hey, can we use this name? I bet they won't decline.
You know, just
I mean, it's not like they trademarked it, so you could change it anyways.
You could just drop the G. Just call it Imp. That works.
Imp?
Yeah, Imp. Why not?
Doesn't Imp have like negative connotations too, though?
It's not GIMP though.
True. I guess it would be an improvement. Yes.
I don't know.
Just call it Pimp, right?
You know what? I would support that.
But it would be photo and image, right? Like, I know the two are kind of the same, but manipulation program. Just call it Pimp. Pimp my photos.
I can get behind this. If anyone from the GIMP project happens to hear this, you full license to use the name Pimp.
Absolutely, I'll give you that one for free. The next one will require a donation to Buddies at Budgie, but this one I'll give you for free any day.
Honestly, I feel like GIMP right now has bigger problems to deal with than the name. Like, the whole not being able to select layers thing that they're finally dealing with in, like, groups of layers. How that has taken, like, 20 years to implement. It's been a journey. It's finally happening.
I mean, it's better than it not happening, right?
That's true.
Like, I'm more than happy because have I donated to GIMP? No. Should I? Yes. They don't owe me anything. But I still use their software on an almost daily basis.
Do you know what? The fun thing about GIMP is it is a resounding success about how easy it is to work with the GTK toolkit. It's taken 20 years to implement selecting layer groups.
Yeah. I do wonder if that's like a result of GDK itself, or
to be fair,
if
they
that's
use
like
GTK
other
too.
libraries of GEGL or like Gegel. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, like Cairo and all that stuff. But
I'm sure there's plenty of reasons why it's like that.
Yeah.
Also, they don't have the funding that, like, people often talk about like how developed like Critter is, for example. Like, I'm pretty sure Critter right now, or at least was sponsored by Intel. Like, they have like money. They have money for like full-time developers. Like, they can do things at a much faster pace. Yeah. Same with OBS. Like OBS, they have like I know you mentioned on your Mastodon like it was something like OBS show. What was it like? OBS shows like what's capable with open source or something. I don't remember exactly what you said.
Yeah, I could pull it up on my Mastodon. It's pretty recent. I said whenever I fire up OBS Studio, it's like getting a shot of hopium. That the development, adoption, and quality of open source software can absolutely crush or rival proprietary alternatives. Yes, I know there are a ton of amazing, other amazing examples like Blender and LibreOffice, but OBS Studio just hits differently for some reason. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also because I kind of remember the days when like you streamed through VLC.
Is that what you did?
Not even joking.
On Linux.
That was one option that you had. I think it might have been one of the only options. Somebody could correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure there's somebody out there that used to be an AV specialist that like used to do through like an FFmpeg CLI bash script that they had. But that's at the very least what I remember. And then OBS Studio came around, and this was at the time of like I'm trying to remember some of the other streaming solutions that nobody uses anymore at this point.
XSplit would have been the big thing.
There's like XSplit, I think.
Yeah.
I think XSplit was a big one.
I think Blackmagic had their own thing as well.
Right.
Once again, that no one uses because why would you?
Because OBS Studio exists or Streamlabs OBS, like either which one, or maybe they call it. I think they call it like Streamlabs Studio or something. At this point.
They dropped the OBS thing. Well, that's the reason why Logitech sponsors OBS to make them. I don't know how many people remember that. There was this big drama about Streamlabs OBS like last year or maybe I don't know. COVID's completely lost my sense of time over the past couple of years. Somewhere in like the past year or two, where streamers realized, I actually didn't know this myself at the time, but streamers started to realize that Streamlabs OBS is not actually affiliated with OBS besides the fact that it's a fork, but they were using the name of OBS. And I believe, I want to say like Pokimane or someone like that was the face of Streamlabs at the time, found out and was like, hey, actually like support the main project or drop me for like completely out of your marketing. And to make this problem go away, Logitech, who owns Streamlabs, donated a lot of money to the OBS project. Now, they never said that's the reason why they did it. But the timing was very convenient for when Logitech did that.
I mean, like, the problem with if I was in OBS Studios, like, shoes, and I got just a crap ton of money, I think I would probably stop complaining as well.
Because they're a premier tier sponsor, which I think means they donated like at least 100,000 or something like that.
Ooh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it says somewhere on their website how much. It's definitely a lot of money. Like they paid for a couple of full-time devs for at least a year or so. I don't know. I'm not going to be able to find it on their website. Maybe if I click, premier tier? No, I don't know. It's somewhere on here. But like OBS has a lot. Also, a Stream Elements, who is compared to the Streamlabs, also donates to OBS, which is funny. Like OBS, like they are. I don't know how many people they have working full time on that project, but just looking at like the sponsors they have, like they clearly have the money to be putting some like people on there. Like on their premier tier, they have YouTube, Logitech, Twitch, and Facebook, and then Diamond tier, Nvidia, AMD, and Stream Elements. Like that's a lot of money. There's a lot of money.
Yeah, just add Intel here, and you probably have everybody that's relevant, right? Like, man.
Well, you have that.
So like YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook, I get because they all have their own streaming solutions. Yeah. Like Logitech obviously makes sense. AMD, like I'm curious why or what the business value is to AMD for sponsoring. I wonder, is it to ensure that like APUs and AMD GPUs remain, like they continue to have proper like acceleration and transcoding capabilities, or?
That would be my assumption. Like, AMD is very, we'll say, far behind Nvidia when it comes to the streaming. Actually, they're far behind with a lot of the GPU stuff. Like, they have dropped the ball entirely when it comes to machine learning. They have dropped the ball entirely when it comes to GPU video encoding. Like, they've just let Nvidia own that space. And I get
this is true, but you know where they haven't dropped the ball?
Where?
Wayland support.
That's true. That's very true.
Like, I know people are going to wonder, like, hey, what about that NVIDIA support on, like, you know, Budgie desktop when you go WL routes? No, we'll be in the same position as everybody else, which is tell you to buy a AMD or Intel graphics card.
Just,
and I know, like, that's easy for me to say,
sure,
you know, I'm European, I have, like, a nice salary.
I was going to say, where do the European
I have good purchasing
come from?
Well, it's just, like, we have good purchasing
sure.
power for in a lot of the EU member states, at the very least. So I know, like, a lot of people can't just afford to go out and buy another GPU. But, like, come on, NVIDIA, like, get with the program. Like,
my understanding it's better than it used to be, but it's still
it is better, but the performance is not great because they are lacking some, like, GBM APIs that they need to implement. At least on the WL root side. I'm not quite sure about the K and Butter side, but at least for WL roots.
Well, you have that Arc box back there.
Yep.
Are you actually using that, or is that just like a shelf decoration?
No, I actually use it. Yeah.
Okay.
I have an Intel Arc A770. And you're probably wondering, why would you do that?
AMD
is just vastly AMD is vastly superior. Yeah, I know, but I also, like, I need to scratch the itch this itch of kernel testing and Mesa lib git testing and all that, because for a while I was doing kernel maintenance and a lot of the Mesa stuff for Solus. So, like, I was running a Linux Next, which was always the release candidate kernels. You know, I was, like, dog fooding Mesa lib stuff just to try to catch some issues before other people, before we tried to push it to unstable. And when I left Solus, I was like, oh man, I need to have my stuff break. Things aren't exciting enough for me. And Intel came out with its GPUs, and the support for them was not great, and it required kernel patches.
It did.
And then it required an RC kernel, and then eventually you had to run Mesa Git. Nowadays, you don't have to do any of that. You can run the latest kernel and just normal Mesa lib. So it's a little less exciting. So I might have to find some different hardware to run that causes breakages. But that's the main reason why I went with Intel Arc. I'm not like some Intel shill or any of that. So
go to a secondhand shop and buy yourself like a GTX 660 or something. Just run Wayland on that, see what happens.
I don't need to actually. So my home server, I have a NVIDIA GPU, and I also have I also have a 1060 just sitting here that I could just.
Yeah, but that's in the range of like needed. Supported cards. I love whenever. Okay, I love every time I talk about Wayland and someone's like, "Hey, my 13-year-old NVIDIA GPU doesn't support Wayland properly." Like, yes, but NVIDIA doesn't support that GPU properly either. Like, I get it. You're gonna keep running X11, but like, yeah.
Some of us like buying modern hardware.
Well, it's not even modern. Like, I get having to buy secondhand hardware. Like, that's totally fair.
Sure.
Like it, but like we're not.
I mean, even the NVIDIA 10 series.
The rest of the
is like still really good.
Yeah, the rest of Linux desktop is not gonna wait behind for basically e-waste. Like I get it, you're running it, like it's what you're gonna run, but like let's be honest about what we're doing here. Like, it's e-waste at this point.
Yeah, we're talking about underperforming, power-hungry GPUs in a lot of ways. I mean, that said, it's not like NVIDIA 4E series is, you know, like a knight in shining armor when it comes to power efficiency and consumption either.
Yeah, that's
you know, like another reason why I went with Intel Arc over what AMD had at the time was lower TDP of the GPUs. And this was around the time of November, December of last year, when prices for electricity were excruciatingly high here. And I wanted an upgrade, but I also didn't want to have to pay like 2-3x in electricity costs either for it. So I went with that instead of 40 series. But AMD offerings at the moment are quite comparable at the very least in terms of TDP. But
I luckily don't have that concern because my house has solar, which is nice. In Australia, we just have sun. It's just always sun. Like, we get a power bill, but it's like, oh, you want to pay like $80 for 3 months? Like, sure, I can do that. Why not?
Man, I would love to have solar. But yeah, so my line of thinking is I would love to support NVIDIA GPUs. I think users using NVIDIA are like well within their rights to have that. But also, like, we can't keep waiting around for NVIDIA. And I think we stopped, at least in terms of Mutter and Kwin, we stopped waiting around for NVIDIA. And we're like, yeah, so if you guys don't get your act together, our enterprise Linux operating systems are going to be inadequate in terms of like running with NVIDIA hardware. And NVIDIA's like, oh, well, we better get some stuff sorted then, because we like our enterprise customers and we definitely don't want them switching over to AMD. So that's what we need more of in this community, is a good old Linus middle finger, you know, and just roll with it. AMD, Intel, and when NVIDIA wants to get their act together completely, then welcome aboard.
I had not thought about that when it came to the whole rel dropping Xorg thing, but I guess that's a fair point. Like, maybe that would be what they actually need to have happen.
Yep. And if you have default support on Fedora Workstation, and you know, like KDE is slightly less relevant when it comes to like, you know, most consumers or Linux consumers, especially in the business space. But like that, or like any sort of stuff around CentOS, then it's gonna be GNOME and Mutter. So, you know, I know NVIDIA and the Mutter and GNOME team have been working hand in hand quite a bit, but I'd like to see the rest of the ecosystem sort of be carried along with that.
Maybe one day, you know, everything will be equivalent. But until then, I would love to have an NVIDIA card. Like, if I had the additional money, I would just get an NVIDIA card just for the NVENC encoder. Like, for me, that would be valuable enough. But I really hope that AMD sorts out their encoder, because it's not terrible, but it's also not good. Plus, also, there's just a lot of additional things that NVIDIA is doing, especially in the gaming space. Like, they've got their whole the thing that's not FSR. DLSS.
Oh, DLSS.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, they have DLSS 3 and 3.5
which,
now. So.
From what I've seen of that, it's magic. I do not understand how it works, why it works so well. I know the direction they're going is, like, not rendering, like, actual proper frames, but generating things based on AI model. I don't understand how it works. But
it's black magic to me as well. Yeah.
It's really cool. And
yeah.
Look, if you can go from games being barely playable to actually working really well, like, that's awesome. And considering that, especially now with a lot of the UE5 stuff, a lot of game devs are like pushing things very graphically. Like, we are getting to that point where we're sort of getting back to those like, hey, will it run Crisis sort of thing, where like mid to high end cards are struggling to run like a lot of games. Like you actually want to be going like really high tier if you actually want to be pushing a game. For a while, it just was not the case. Like you could buy like a mid tier card, it was going to max out most things. It's, I don't know. Like also then there's a whole like people wanting to reduce their power consumption as well. So if you can get a lower tier card that might have a lower TDP and then get higher performance out of it than would otherwise be possible, like that's also really cool as well.
Or even getting like a slightly like higher end GPU, but then underclocking it slightly.
Well, that yeah.
I mean that more affects thermals, but it can affect TDP as well.
With thermals,
yeah, I mean,
by extension, because of the rest of your system, also is going to increase power consumption as well. But
yeah, exactly. I am excited for the new FSR though, because when I tried I don't remember if it was FSR or FSR2 with Cyberpunk 2077 on my NVIDIA GPU like last year. I went from, and I play at 4K, so things have to play at that resolution because aside from not everything. New World is the exception. That I'll run at 1440p in a window because I'm not going to 1440p upscale. But FSR2 took Cyberpunk at 4K from completely unplayable to 60 FPS stable. And honestly, I didn't notice the texture difference. I think it was like 1080p textures, but it could have been less and I wouldn't have noticed. Or another example, No Man's Sky. That somehow went from completely unplayable to I turned it on and it was actually using textures at 720p. And I somehow did not notice. That's how good the upscaling was. So, and I'm more on board with these open source vendor neutral alternatives like FSR, as opposed to DLSS. But just because I want to be able to have the flexibility of say, oh, tomorrow I want to go out and buy an AMD GPU. Or, for example, have Intel. And yeah, like Intel has their own XESS or something that like nobody supports.
I didn't know that existed.
I think the only game I've seen it in is like Diablo 4, and nobody plays that at this point. So
yeah, but in the list of games you mentioned there, you mentioned New World. Is anyone playing New World at this point?
True. I'll have they have an expansion coming out. I'm not trying to show it. They do have. I think it's Angry Earth. So I've been playing a lot of New World, just to get my gear score up and all that.
Yeah, I
prep for the new levels and stuff.
I don't know if your Mastodon or your website. One of your things, maybe it was your YouTube channel. I don't know. One of your things you mentioned being an MMO junkie. I was gonna ask you what you played.
Also, Elder Scrolls Online.
Okay.
So that's the tall guy right there, Molag Bal. And this is from the latest. So this is Daedra Mora. I don't remember her name or its name technically because it's a Daedra. But her May is Mora. So I play Elder Scrolls Online as well. Not so much nowadays, but I come back during a lot of the patches, and I'll come back during this one. But I know you're a Final Fantasy junkie.
Yeah, we'll say that. Look, here's the thing, right? I have not finished the story. I'm like a patch behind in the story, so I'm like almost caught up. But I've probably got a couple 1,000 hours in that game. The MMO I went hardest on was RuneScape. I played that from.
Are we talking like old school RuneScape or new RuneScape?
I played from 2006 until RS3 beta came out. I didn't even play RS3. I quit when the beta came out.
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised whenever I hear people still playing OSRS. Like, it makes sense to me. I really liked it when I played it. But...
Well, no, that makes sense to me because they're actually patching it. What confuses me are the people that play Classic WoW. Like, it's just a done game. Like, there's nothing being added to it. Like, yeah, you can, like, not that like people who are going through like Wrath and like all like, that makes sense. But the people who are still playing like the classic servers, like nothing's added to that. It's just classic.
But that's the nice thing. I would argue that's the nice thing because you don't have to deal with Dragonfly. You don't have to deal with like having to worry about it's not corrupted armor, but corruption and all that with Shadowlands and the terrible like raiding and dead tier sets and tiers there. Like you don't have to worry about any of that with Classic. It's a simpler game.
To be fair, I never played.
I feel like the difficulty ramp in World of Warcraft in terms of like raids is just like unnecessarily difficult and time consuming. Like having to get res then run all the way through the raid or the dungeon or to get back to where you're supposed to be. You know, you have to deal with consumable. Oh, it's awful. I don't like modern World of Warcraft raiding whatsoever.
To be fair, I never played WoW, so I can't really speak on that. There was a time, so back in high school, a bunch of my mates were playing WoW. I think this would have been around Mr. Pandaria, and they're like, "Hey, you should come play WoW." And I thought about it, and I was like, that wouldn't have been that long after I stopped playing RuneScape, or around the time. I was like, I don't need another MMO right now. It doesn't need to happen.
Yeah, that's fair. What I can say, at least my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if they're called raids in Final Fantasy, but at least my understanding is that the downtime between boss kills in Final Fantasy is much lower than in World of Warcraft. You have to deal with just less ads and trash and less like res stuff, and there's just less nonsense that you have to deal with. So, which I think is why a lot of people are attracted to Final Fantasy.
So 14 has dungeons which are just they're very hyper linear. That's what I will say about the dungeons in 14. There were a couple in Realm Reborn, the first of the expansions, where they've reworked them over the years. Initially, you could get a little bit lost. Now, the only way to get lost is to stop pressing W. Like, it's... Wow. Yeah, that's one thing I will say about 14. They've streamlined the dungeons a little bit too much. Like, they're fun, like, set pieces and... like, casual experiences. Hyper casual. And still you somehow... you have tanks that don't read the aggro list. And then... yeah, yeah, let's blame it on the tanks. Tanks are healers. It's not my problem as a DPS. I play healer half the time. Fair enough. But then you have trials, which are your 8-man. I guess that would be the equivalent of raids. Yeah, that's what we have in ESO, but I think it's like a 12-man. So you have trials, yeah. So you just basically you have the boss, and then the boss will have different stages. There's no... maybe they'll have, like, ads on certain bits, but they'll be very mechanically tied. It's not just ads for the sake of ads. And then you have the Savage and Extreme versions of those, which I guess would be sort of like your Mythic equivalent. And then you have your casual raids, which are the Alliance raids, which are the, like, 24-man, which is basically split up into 3 groups of 8. And then usually the mechanics are like one group go here, one group go here, one group go here, and then different sets. Like the near raids in Shadowbringers, for example. Like there'll be a mechanic where each of the tanks will be targeted by like a big death laser. If you point it at the other party, I hate you. Because if you do that, the party dies. Basically, you have to like make sure the tanks are just facing away from the other parties, and simple things like that. From what and then there's the ultimates, which are like your pinnacle high tier content. Right. Like you have to be going in with this. Yeah, you're not pugging ultimates except for like the first
No,
Ultimate.
everybody has a particular thing assigned to them with particular gear assigned.
Yeah.
You know, they have certain skills on their hotbars or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
So you play all that under Linux as well, like
14 doesn't have anti-cheat, it just runs just fine.
wow.
Now, to be fair, for a long time the main launcher didn't work. I think it works now, but no one plays with the main launcher because.
Do you just launch it through Steam, I guess, or?
Okay, let me explain to you the
No,
nightmare.
I'm genuinely curious.
No, I need to. No,
you know, like.
No, I need to explain to you the nonsense that is 14. So,
okay.
The Steam account and the Windows account are not the same thing. So if you buy the game on Steam, you did not buy the game on Windows. So if you want to use the Windows launcher, you need to buy the Windows version of the game. I think you can, like, migrate them over now, but, like, it's really stupid. So I have the...
But why?
Because Square Enix doesn't like your money. Also, if you buy the console version, that account is not the same account.
That I kind of understand, though. Or is there crossplay?
There's crossplay, yes.
Okay, then that doesn't make any sense.
Square Enix doesn't like your money.
It's not real crossplay to me. If I can't then buy it on Windows and then log into my account that I was playing on console.
They don't like your money. And then just trying to work out how to buy the game's kind of confusing, just in and of itself.
That I have heard, yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. But you know, okay. One of the main reasons a lot of people don't use the main launcher as well is there is this problem in the game called animation lock, also known as, if you don't want to like be coping about it, called input delay. There are certain abilities in the game that have a built-in animation lock that is ping independent. So basically, certain things will just feel delayed when they shouldn't be. And if you're playing, like, I play on the American servers because the Australian servers are dead, and yeah, I don't play on the Australian servers. I don't want to queue for a dungeon for 30 minutes as a DPS. It's not going to happen.
Right.
So, yeah, this is built-in input delay. Now, luckily, Square Enix doesn't like it, but there are plugins that fix the input delay that will queue things up and send them to the server like they should be sent, which you guys can find if you want to do a very little bit of searching. But most people will not talk about, like, the whole thing with plugins, unlike WoW from my understanding, is nobody talks about plugins. It's because of the whole console crossplay thing. Like, console's not going to be able to run plugins, but everyone on PC sort of acknowledges that everybody else is running plugins. Yeah. I've seen UIs for, like, high-tier WoW raiders. I'm like, what are you guys even playing here?
Yeah, typically it's like Louis extended or some other frames. Yeah. So do those plugins work under Linux as well, or
all fine?
Huh. Wow. Are they just like Lua plugins or something? Like
I'm not actually sure what they're written in. Let me have a look. Let's go.
Because like for Elder Scrolls Online, you could use Minion. I hate Minion. Absolutely, with a dying passion, hate Minion. Technically runs under Linux, so you could do that for Elder Scrolls Online. And I think most people use the CurseForge one for World of Warcraft. And yeah, with those two games, it's like if you play on PC, which of course with World of Warcraft, that is what you play on. But Elder Scrolls Online has console as well. But it's like you play with add-ons.
Yeah.
Like if you want to be relevant when you're doing raids, you play with add-ons or with trials, because there's like call outs on mechanics and that sort of stuff. They've been gradually adding that to the game, but like as just a native feature, so them console plebs can enjoy it too. But yeah, it is nice. Like when I hear about Final Fantasy, there isn't that sort of culture. And as far as I'm aware, even like the use of DPS parsing and like DPS
Bannable
metrics
offense.
is also I was gonna say frowned upon, but damn, like bannable is great.
If you bring it up, like, you know, if you're doing it in like a Discord or whatever, like that's
right with all your friends or whatever.
If you mention it like in the chat in game, like that's bannable offense.
Right.
See, there is this. I was just having a look. It's I've seen some plugins written in C#, some in C++. But so the main thing people use is a system called Dalamud, which provides like APIs and stuff. I haven't looked into it myself, so I'm not really entirely sure. It doesn't seem to be. There seems to be bindings for a couple of different languages, from what I can tell, though. But I think that one of the problems that 14 has is kind of the opposite problems, like where a lot of people are. What's a good way to put it? So as opposed to being like openly toxic, like just telling you are terrible, it's more like a lot of, how would you say it? What's the word I'm trying to think of? Like, it's like, well, you're being nice, but you don't actually mean it. What am I trying?
Oh, like passive aggressive.
Yeah. That you basically a lot of passive aggressive stuff, and there's a lot of people that will like sort of do things kind of like skirt the rules. Like in PvP, for example, there's a mode called Crystalline Conflict, which is a poorly designed PvP mode, but it's what Square Enix is really obsessed with developing right now. I wish they would just do Rival Wings. So Crystalline Conflict is basically, you know, in like Team Fortress 2, there's like one of the modes where you can like push a cart to like the enemy's base.
Yeah.
It's basically that, but with a crystal.
Okay.
In this mode, there isn't like regular text chat. The text chat is set commands. Now, oftentimes you'll have people that are like spamming specific commands, or they'll start spamming good game when there's like halfway through the match or something.
So it's just like general like BM stuff.
Yeah, it's just
like bad manners.
Yeah, it's not like, you know, you're not get called racial slurs, but it's not like the game isn't toxic in its own ways. And look, it might be an improvement over what you used to, but it's a weird game. Like, one of the things that's really weird to me, especially coming from a RuneScape background, is nobody talks in public chat, really. Like, most of the chats are in, like, link shells, which are basically, like, 14's group chats, or they're in guild chats, which is, like, a free company chat in 14. Basically, nobody talks in, like, public chat.
Right. The problem with New World is there's a global chat. So no matter where you are on the server, no matter the territory, you have to read what people are saying. Because people also fail to use the proper recruitment channels. So you just get all the noise. Fortunately, Elder Scrolls, like, they have zone specific chats. But oh man, the global chat in New World is awful.
I think RuneScape,
isn't it wild though? Like, all this runs on Linux.
Yeah.
Through like stuff like Proton. It's just, we've come so far since, like, I remember like when Steam for Linux was announced, and that was like revolutionary. It's like, oh man, this is it. Like, a year of Linux on the desktop. Here we go. You know, we're going to get all the native ports. I mean, that didn't happen.
Then Steam machines happened.
They were a part of our history, yes. Fortunately, the Steam Deck has seen much better success.
I've heard some people make fairly good arguments for why the Steam machines, whilst being a failure, weren't a bad thing per se. It's sort of like it gave Valve the push they needed to actually, you know, go down that wine direction, which I guess is like it's copium. That's pretty much what it is. It's trying to find an excuse for why.
No, it is copium. Terrible. It's a path of least resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
but the fact that I can, like, just fire up Elder Scrolls Online and it works. I could fire up World of Warcraft. You could fire up Final Fantasy. Like, that blows my mind. Because I don't know about you, but I hate Windows. And it's kind of funny because, then why, Josh, are you mimicking practically the Windows 10 user interface, it seems, with this Budgie thing? But like Windows as an operating system, I will only use as a last resort. And basically, if it's like after months of pressure from the wife to play one particular game that I know doesn't work on Proton, then I'm like, fine, I'll install it so we can play it for a little bit. And then it's going to get nuked immediately off my system. So I don't even have to worry about this thing called Windows.
The wildest thing to me is like a lot of anti-cheat games just work now. Like Elden Ring and Armored Core, they both have EAC. And they just, like, the multiplayer just works. Like, there's no additional tinkering around. It just works. Now, there is the whole...
BattleEye stuff works.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw what EA's been doing in that regard, though. Because they've got their own anti-cheat system now.
I really hope that doesn't come to Apex.
Yeah, that is a big... Well, it's not just Apex. That's the thing. It's not just Apex that EA owns, because they could decide they want to bring it into Forza. They want to bring it into, like... They've got a bunch... There are a lot of IPs under EA.
Yeah.
They're already doing it on Battlefield.
All the sports games that people really like.
Well, if they're going to do it in FIFA, it's going to probably happen to all the sports games. That seems pretty obvious to me. FIFA is their main one, because that's the big one. They really do not want people cheating in their biggest moneymaker. But if it goes well for that, which it didn't, because there were so many people on the Windows side complaining when they first added it, like, this does not work. Like, just get rid of it.
Good. I hope it continues to just work absolutely miserably. So all these developers are like, okay, kernel level anti-cheat, really bad idea. And then Valorant, maybe they could swap away from it to something like EAC or BattleEye, and then we could get it working properly under Linux.
How does that
sound? Sounds great to me.
I kind of wish that we just stopped calling it kernel level anti-cheat and just call it what it is, which is a rootkit.
It's malware. It's
malware, yeah.
Like, that's the way I look at it. I only just sort of tolerate BattleEye and EAC because that's just what people like. We decided at some point as an industry that's what we're going to be doing, this anti-cheat stuff, instead of trying to do it with strictly server side. But I'm just happy that it works, EAC and BattleEye, because, for example, like Ark Survival Evolved, so a story about Ark Survival Evolved, back in the early Steam days, they used a really old Ubuntu runtime. I don't know if they still do, because I use it through Flatpak. Now, the Steam runtime, which I believe was using 12.04, was already quite old when they started even shipping it. And Ike had the brilliant idea in the Solus land of doing this thing called LSI, or Linux Steam Integration.
Okay.
So he wrote a system called libintercept. So when certain API calls or certain libraries were requested, it would redirect it from the runtime to our system libraries. So what we were able to do is actually see proper uplift in terms of performance in some games by optimizing some of these libraries with like PGO or profile guided optimization or LTO, or so link time optimization, that sort of stuff, for unroll loops and all sorts of random GCC flags to try to improve performance in some of these libraries. And it also really improved the Steam game compatibility. Something else we did, which is a little interesting, was with some games like Ark Survival Evolved, if textures, for example, water, would fail to load, we would load them from a different location. So, for example, with Ark, when you were playing on some of the maps like Island, the water textures would fail to load. So we would load them from a completely different DLC. You would have to install it, but like that's the effort we went through to get it working. Because up until Wildcard, just dropped support for the native Linux version and just switched to using Proton, it was like constantly broken. Every single DLC had some new magical awful error. So in a way, like them giving up on a native port was a real blessing in disguise, because I have like 3,000 hours in Ark Survival World. Yeah. And and not having to boot up into Windows anymore to play that was really nice, because the DLCs, all the workshop items and mods worked as well, which was really surprising. So, but
I'm really
yeah,
happy.
So that's a little.
Oh, go on.
We don't have to do that stuff anymore, which is quite nice.
I'm happy this whole like no tucks, no bucks things is kind of like faded. I get it, like it made sense. Like people thought they could actually push for like actual native ports that were actually going to be supported.
Yeah.
But I'm perfectly happy with the Proton direction we've gone. In the end, like there are games that I've played native. Like Hollow Knight has a perfectly fine native port. But then I've played Black Mesa, which is a little rough, we'll say.
Right.
It's not terrible, but it's a bit rough. But then there are other games where the developers just don't care at all. And it's like, why?
They'll do the bare minimum. It's an export option for them.
Well, in some ways, it's not even just an export. They just stop exporting at some point. And just...
Yeah, that's true.
Years out of date. It's like...
Yeah, I've seen that as well. I think I've had the best luck when games have been developed with either Godot or Unity, which is a completely other bag. Good job, Unity, and shooting yourself in the foot there. But so for example, like I've had really good experience with Halls of Torment, which is a Godot game, I believe, or with 20 minutes till dawn, which is a Unity game. So I've had some good experience with that. What I find a little weird is even some of the companies that really do put a lot of effort into native ports, like for example, Paradox with City Skylines, or with Hearts of Iron 4. Sometimes those native games just don't run as well as the Proton versions, or they'll end up being like more susceptible to crashes. So sometimes I just kind of have to fall back to the Proton variants, even if there is a native version. And when that's happened enough times, I just don't care anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, if I can install it and it works, like I don't care if it's native anymore. I just want to play a game. I don't want to have to spend hours debugging something, or like going and fetching some random library because it assumes it's on my local system. Like, no, just give me the damn game I paid for.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree. Like, and for most things, it's just like that with you running Proton now. Like, it's so rare at this point. I'm struggling to think of the last time I played a game where it had issues. I want to say it was It Takes Two, and that's only because the EA launch was playing up.
Right.
Besides,
for me, it was Diablo 4. I gave up, and I was like, okay, I know like this game ain't doing so hot, and it's gonna be dead pretty quick anyways. So like I'll just temporarily install Windows. I'll give it just the bare minimum disk space it needs. I'll have like Diablo 4 on a separate partition, so I could also use it on like the Linux side when I want to. Installed and played it for a bit. But like on the Linux side, I think it was primarily because of XeSS, actually. So thanks, Intel. But I think it's primarily because they were trying to use XeSS and it was failing to load. It would just crash everything. But yeah, it's all right. It's one title, and yeah, I'm not even really terribly surprised. But if I was to fire up my Steam, which I think I will do real quick.
You can just wait till Season 8 when it comes out of beta.
Yeah, exactly. When it actually has, proper endgame content, and then you don't have to play the same thing over and over and over again. it's kind of funny. I don't actually have a lot of games installed at this point, but if I look at my favorites, it's like Colony Survival, Elite Dangerous. So I have my HOTAS over here. So I stopped playing when Odyssey came out because performance in Odyssey was garbage fire. But before that, with Horizons, it was beautiful and it worked just flawlessly. EVE Online, I've played some. Factorio, I think, is actually, I don't remember if it's a native game. I think it's a native game, and it's one that just works TM.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, Civ games. Oh, Division 2. Division 2 is one that I play that's a Proton game that just works flawlessly as well. Like, I wouldn't, if you were to tell me it was running through a compatibility layer instead of it being a native game, I would actually call you a liar. So...
Actually, my favorite in that regard is I don't know if you saw it, there was some recent stuff about Cyberpunk running better under Linux with an AMD GPU or something like that.
I'm not even surprised.
I think it's something to do with the difference with how Windows and Linux handle caching or something. I don't remember the exact details.
Right.
And for whatever reason, on an AMD GPU, the test was getting like 30% better performance on the Linux side.
Like maybe it's better at like shader loading and shader compilation.
Yeah,
like
I'll see if I can find
around
it.
That or something.
Cyberpunk 2077 runs better on. I think Liam did a article on it.
It wouldn't surprise me. He does an article on
probably. Well, I found one from Tom's Hardware.
Basically everything.
So user tested it on Nabara, which is cool. They tested it on Nabara. It's mining game, blah, blah, blah. What is the reason? Whatever the case. Okay, thank you, Tom's Hardware, for not giving me any explanation. It's somewhere around here. Someone will tell me in the comment section, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, please do, because I'm looking at gaming on Linux as well. I'm not seeing it.
Mate, I thought maybe Liam commented about it on Mastodon or something.
Maybe, yeah.
I need to play Cyberpunk at some point. I hear it's gotten a lot better.
I have heard the same thing as well.
Mm-hmm. And then there's a DLC coming out soon as well, which apparently people are
was it the Phantom Liberty or something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we'll get to at some point. I got so many other games to play. I still want to catch up on the Yakuza games, so like that's gonna take a bit of time.
Yeah, I mean when I'm not busy with like either work or Budgie stuff, I think it's typically like New World or ESO or something like that.
The MMO grind will catch you.
Yeah, the problem with games like Cyberpunk is like I have to stop at a very particular part in like these sort of games in terms of story, so I even remember what happened, because it might be like 3 months from now when I like actually return to the game.
Right.
Unless I like actually make an effort on like a daily basis or a regular basis at the very least to go back and play these games. So I don't remember like anything from Cyberpunk, which I guess is great because I bought the game and I get to experience it all over again. So,
well, on that note, we should probably be ending this off at some point. Just past the 2 hour mark a little bit ago, and I want to go to sleep at some point, so that'll be nice.
Yeah, what time is it there?
It is 2:18.
Oh my god!
Not that late. This is my normal time for the podcast right now.
Well. Thank you for like. One, having me on, and two, also just having it at a time that's sane for both of us. When I was on the Fedora podcast, it started at midnight my time, so I've been in your shoes, but it also wasn't a 2 hour podcast. Mm-hmm. So
last week I had the executive director of the Godot Foundation on, so it was very similar time for that one as well, because he's in somewhere in Europe. I don't remember.
Right.
Anyway. I guess direct people to Budgie stuff, your stuff, wherever you want to send them to. Give them links.
I guess. I mean, I could. I guess that's why I can't. Or like I know we talked a lot about gaming, but I suppose like there's this Budgie thing.
There is
if you want to use it, obviously recognize. Yeah, it's only with X11. We're getting there with Wayland. Going over to buddies@budgie.org. If you hit the big Get Budgie buttons, you can't miss them. You could choose what flavor you want. They're all going to be flagged as outdated at the moment because we literally just released
that makes sense.
Budgie 10.8.1, which is a bug fix release on top of 10.8. But if you use like Arch, it's available there. If you use Fedora, with Fedora 39, it'll have the latest. And in fact, Neil, unsurprisingly, helped with merging in my updates for Budgie Desktop for Fedora. So if you're on Fedora 38 or even 37, it'll be available there too. So yeah, you could do that. We have a Mastodon. In fact, that's the only place we communicate in terms of like social networking because not a fan of Elon Musk. So Buddy's Budgie at floss.social. So, and I run my own instance if for some weird reason you want to follow me. It's me at joshuastrobl.social. So, yeah.
Awesome.
That's it.
Yeah. Is anything else you want to mention, or is that you reckon that's it?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm a simple man.
Was also your website as well for any other things you didn't explicitly
mention. You don't need to go there. Yeah, it's outdated. Yeah, ignore the fact that my website exists. We'll all be much happier for it.
Yeah. Well, my website's even more out of date. And I just use it as a link tree basically, and like redirects to other things. Like I've got like BrodyRobertson.xyz/YouTube/Twitch/other things that just go to my different services.
Right.
Anyway, that's pretty much all I use it for. Anyway, main channel is Brody Robertson. I do Linux videos there 6-ish days a week. I don't know what's going to be out when this comes out because I don't know, this will be out in like a week or so. But there'll be Linux videos there probably. And the gaming channel is Brody on Games. I stream it on YouTube and Twitch. Right now, I'm probably playing through Armored Core 6 still. And I reckon I'll be playing Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance. I think. Unless I finish that already. In which case, I don't know. Maybe I'm playing Birth by Sleep. Or some weeb game. I don't know. I might be playing Neptunia Sisters vs. Sisters. Check it out. See what's over there. If you're listening to the audio version of this, you can find the video version on YouTube at Tech Over Tea. If you're watching the video, you can find the audio on pretty much any podcast platform. Not Google Podcasts, because that's being deprecated soon, apparently. I didn't know this. But there's an RSS feed and other things. Go to your favorite podcast platform. Search for it. You'll find it. And, yeah. Give you the final word. What do you want to say?
Yep. Thanks for having me on. I would also quickly like to mention we are on Budgie's on TIL vids now, which is a PeerTube instance. So we've uploaded our back catalog of content, which is basically nothing, but it's there. And in fact, that's the only place we are going to be uploading to going forward because you respect your own privacy and I respect your privacy too. So feel free to head on over there. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been a great chat. And I look forward to showing off Budgie 11 at some point. EFL, cute, ice, some new invention, who will know? So maybe keep an eye on the blog for that. We have RSS feeds as well.
Awesome. Well, I'll catch you guys later.